appreciate those. But getting on with our program, I'd like to have a gentleman that worked with some of the guys in the all-colored fire station. And I don't know much about Mr. Brice, but I know he comes to us from Phoenix, Arizona, with a host of credentials. I did see some of those. It was scary. I'm afraid he probably sings a little better than I do too. So, without further ado, I would like to ask Mr. Clayton Brice, PhD, to please come to our podium.
Well, after having all these firemen up here, I wish I'd have stayed on the department. The circumstances took me away. Before I get started, I'd like to thank my family, a lot of friends in the audience. And there's several people in the audience that when I was a little kid, about these kids' age, I was their fat boy. And they know who they are. It's a great honor for me to represent the elite, the dedicated, the fearless, the intelligent, the aristocratic Afro-American firemen who served at No. 3 Fire Station. I could find more words to describe them, but it would be a waste of all of our time because most of us know what they're all about. But most of all, they're very proud. When I was a kid, the Afro-American firemen were my role model. When people today are talking about role models, I got to work with mine. And I was fortunate enough to have the great opportunity to be called their friend. Men such as Captain Rose, Captain Frazier, Captain Tyler, Captain Hatcher, Captain Napier, Captain Thompson, my dad, Clayton, Franklin Brice, George Wilson, Bob Thompson, Bledsoe, Captain Foster, Harry Carper, James Trice, Ivan Blackwell, Alvin Blackwell, Richard Douglas, Bill Peterson, Rudy Wright, Captain Evans, Ted Jones, Charles Shin, who was my cousin, Albert Blackwell, Joe Douglas, Oliver Benning, Arlen Jones, Les Newman, and Willard Buford. These come from my memory, and it's an incomplete list, which I apologize. My 5 years on the fire department represent the best of times and the worst of times. To be a member of No. 3, you as an Afro-American receive 2 benefits. First, you had the best paying job in Topeka for a person of color. Second, you were a member of an elite family. Once you were hired, you would have to work for many of years receiving no promotions because promotions were based on seniority alone. At that time, very few left to take jobs elsewhere. They either retired or died. These events opened the door for new blood. My dad was hired and worked at No. 3 during World War II. replacing firemen who had gone to the armed forces. He felt that he had attained the best job he could have to offer for an Afro-American man. When the war was over and the servicemen returned, my dad lost his job, but he was placed on a waiting list. By the time the next opening occurred, he was too old to be hired. When I was growing up, I knew all the firemen at number 3 because my dad used to proudly take me down and introduce to the friends he had worked with, and he used to sit around and play dominoes. Things were different for the Anglos. The city continued to grow and build new stations, which created new positions. But we only had number 3. I was hired in August of 1960. My first assignment was a 2-week training at the Fire Academy, which was at headquarters at the time. I found out that Rudy Wright and I were the first Afro-Americans to participate in this training. We trained alongside with the Anglos. Upon completion of our training, Rudy and I knew what our assignments would be. We were assigned to number 3, the only Afro-American fire station in Topeka. I was assigned to Captain Albert Evans' ship. At that time, we worked 24 hours on and 24 hours off. Les Newman was especially glad to see me. He was on the department for 5 years and low man and seniority on that ship. When I came through the door, he got to get out of his dirty coveralls and give them to me. To me, that ship was just like one great big family. Although every fireman was in training class every day, the real training was one-on-one. Every man at that station started teaching me everything they knew about fighting fires. They treated me like the new lead, the bride's younger brother. And to most of them, I was. It was my responsibility to follow Captain Evans when we were at a fire. And every fire I learned something new. I was to be on the nozzle. The captain and I would be the first to find the source of the fire and open up the nozzle to extinguish the fire. Number 3 had a reputation of being the first one at every fire. I remember looking forward to going to work every day. The work was tough, but fun too. Buck Benning, Les Newman, and I, and sometimes Albert Blackwell, were jokesters. We would short sheet the beds and fix the beds to fall down when you put your weight on it. Now I want you to remember these people were my big brothers and my role model. And they kept me in a lot of trouble. My admiration for these men went beyond their work. Buck Benning, Les Newman, Joe Douglas played on more state championship fast pitch softball teams than I can remember. Bill Peterson was the first Afro-American allowed to play basketball at Topeka High School, and he worked on the other shift. What I'm trying to tell you is that all these men was looked up to by the Afro-American community. Things at number 3 were great, but we had other things we had to deal with and other issues to deal with inside the department. One day, the battalion chief stopped by our station to drop off tickets to sell to the Firemen's Ball. Both Captain Evans and Captain Foster informed the chief that we'd love to sell those tickets, provided we could go to the ball. The chief promised to talk to the owners of Meadow Acres, where the ball was being held. Several days later, they returned and informed the chief that they talked to Meadow Acres, and Meadow Acres would not accept an integrated party. The fire department did not know that several Afro-Americans, firemen, knew and worked for the management and the owner of Meadow Acres. They went to Meadow Acres and questioned them about the integrating the event. They informed us that nobody from the Topeka Fire Department ever talked to them. No fireman at number 3 sold a single ticket. And the irony of that was there was no more fireman ball. Things were beginning to really change in 1963, when there was talk of integrating the fire department. We knew if they continued promotions on seniority, many Afro-Americans would be promoted right away. One of the first things we heard was from the chief that said, if I'm forced to integrate, I would place 2 Afro-Americans at each fire station on each shift so that they can share the same bed. Within a few days, I received an order to report to station number 8. And I was placed on the opposite shift of Rudy Wright. Rumors that we heard now has come true. I reported to Captain Nichols. He introduced me to the firemen that I would be working with and explained my duties. I arrived at the station with seniority over several firemen at the time. I knew that I had been given the lowest seniority job, the same position I had at number 3. After the other firemen said hello for 2 months, the only person to speak to me was Captain Nichols. If I go to the dorm to watch them shoot pool, they would all get up and leave the room and leave me there by myself. If I walk into the TV room, they would go shoot pool. This went on for several months until Leo Lacker, Anango, was assigned to number 8. We played ball against one another. Now I had somebody to talk with. Leo would tell me how stupid they were. But Leo was assigned to drive the assistant chief around during the day. So he wasn't there during the day to talk to me, but he would show up in the evening. Some men on my shift was more concerned about whether I messed around or I was married to a white woman. One of them told me that people should stick to their own race. Later that day, I found out he was married to a Native American. When I confronted him, he explained to me that he meant blacks should stay with blacks. So I asked him, did he know what color Africans were? And he said they're black. I said, take a good look at me. I must have some white blood in me. And your people started this on the plantation. Now, since the Afro-American firemen had so much seniority, the chief decided to play a new game. And it came to promotion. Suddenly there were written tests to qualify for promotion. Guess what? The highest scores were scored by the Afro-American in most cases. The first Afro-American promoted in the Topeka Fire Department was Albert Blackwell. He was promoted to fire inspector. Then I decided I would take the fire inspector's test, exam, and I passed. Chief Lytle, the third chief since integration, called me in to inform me that I did not have enough seniority. I would have to wait another 5 years for that promotion. After that conversation, I decided that I could not wait 10 years for seniority, and I've already passed the test and it proven that I was qualified. So I resigned. After my departure, Afro-Americans were promoted to battalion chiefs. Albert Blackwell was appointed to the first assistant chief, and finally Joe Douglas was appointed to Topeka Fire Department chief. I want to make it very clear, at this time I was on the fire department, not all Anglo firemen exhibit the most racist attitudes towards us. Nevertheless, the ones that did made things very uncomfortable for us. We also have to remember that this was not the only place in Topeka that was practicing racism at this time. And the Anglos did not and do not have the monopoly on racism. However, in the majority of circumstances, the Anglo who are in positions and they control the hiring, promoting, and firing of people. Racism is a learned behavior. If you take a look at little children playing on the playground, there is no color. My experience, other form of acceptance occurred in the sports arena. The ability of the individual is the only issue. Racism is not a natural occurrence. In this country, and in my opinion, racism grew out of economics and not the color of our skin. Since 1960s, things have improved, but racism still exists. Being out front with these kinds of attitudes, it is not fashionable. So people cover them up to protect their pocketbook and themselves. Today, a promising new movement has begun. Organizations and employers are requiring all employees to participate in cultural diversity training. It is not the full answer, but education is always the start. And I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity, and God be with you.